Perhaps one of the more noteworthy trends of our time is the occupation of buildings accompanied by the taking of hostages. The perpetrators of these deeds are generally motivated by political grievance, social injustice, and the deeply felt desire to see how they look on TV. They are a bold lot, reckless and driven, true champions of equal time. Although repeatedly in the news, these events were more often than not ignored in artistic circles. This element was unconcerned and felt far removed from such occurrences, lacking as they were in visual impact. Their complacency was, however, rudely shattered by a series of incidents that stunned the art world with their daring use of local color and imposing command of space. Incident number 1. Untitled. Gasoline on Rag. A small band of exiled Cubists took over the Great Rotunda in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and threatened to set it on fire unless the entire city was broken down into its basic geometric forms. They took as hostages 3 musicians and announced to the media that unless their demands were met, the violinists would be forced at gunpoint to, in the words of Brock X, the leader of the group, fiddle while domes burned. Desperate to avoid such a tragedy, government officials conferred through the night, and on the following morning, an abstract expressionist was sent in to negotiate a peaceful settlement. The abstract expressionist, a crafty fellow with a long history of pulling the wool over people's eyes, seemed to be making some headway until Brock X accused him of having no perspective on the subject. This delayed the proceedings for hours, but eventually the abstract expressionist, who had every reason to want the Cubists out of the picture, calmed Brock X by guaranteeing safe passage if he promised to give up his crazy scheme. Brock X, realizing that they had him up against the wall, accepted the offer, and an assemblage of planes and angles transported the Cubists back to their rightful place in art history. The police, however, were not satisfied with the outcome, and the commanding officer, with a hard edge to his voice, declared in an interview, "My 5-year-old daughter could do better than that." This opinion captured the imagination of the public, and a vigilante committee was quickly formed. Late that night, the abstract expressionist was escorted by a firing squad out into the middle of a color field and splattered with bullets, another victim of shifting tastes. Incident number 2. Girl with Submachine Gun. A group of feminist artists, known as Women Against, took hostage a group of male representational painters and demanded to know why they depicted women as having breasts. The men answered that they painted women with breasts because women had breasts and accused the feminists of fear of framing. The women instantly saw the wisdom of this and apologized profusely, explaining that they were severely depressed because they were all having their blue period. Incident number 3. Form following a function. The good eye of the whole world was upon a small Italian town when a revolutionary terrorist organization known as the Bauhaus Bombers threatened to turn the Leaning Tower of Pisa into a machine for dying by blowing it up. Intent on avoiding clutter, the Bauhaus Bombers took no hostages, but demanded instead that one purely decorative object be destroyed every hour on the hour until their goal was achieved. Just what this goal was not known, for they insisted upon secrecy unless proof could be shown that no other terrorist organization had designs on it. Fearing the loss of the historic building, officials acquiesced totally. Truckloads of bric-a-brac were brought into the town square. Under the direction of the bombers, dozens and dozens of china figurines, clever wall hangings, and superfluous vases were sacrificed to the mysterious cause. Time went on, and still the terrorists refused to divulge their purpose. Daily the crowds grew more restive, and the police, faced with the possibility of a riot, finally devised a plan of action. By dressing one of their number in rust-colored wide wale corduroy and a black turtleneck sweater, they managed to infiltrate the organization. In due time, intelligence reached them that the arsenal they had envisioned was instead one mere bomb of exceedingly meager proportions. Astonished that the bombers would equip themselves so minimally, they questioned their agent as to the reason for this folly. Having spent a good deal of time in the tower, he simply looked at them coolly and remarked, "Less is more." Much relieved, the police entered the building and easily overcame their adversaries. Once in custody, the Bauhaus bombers spoke freely, maintaining passionately that their cause was just. All they wanted, they said, was for the Leaning Tower of Pisa to be straightened out. Asked why such extreme measures had been taken, they shouted, "Never again." They then leveled their final and unarguable charge against the sinking edifice, that the Leaning Tower of Pisa was, and continues to be, blatantly anti-symmetric. Incident number 4. Reclining chair and toaster eating licorice. A small but incongruous group of the followers of Dada, known as MoMA, all dressed in pants and went to the outskirts of Chicago. They then sent a message to the President of the United States demanding a more amusing juxtaposition of laws. Before the President could respond, a well-known consumer advocate charged the members of MoMA with lining a teacup with the pelt of an endangered species. The Dadaists were brought before a Senate subcommittee and forced to accept the terms of an agreement that would compel them in the future to use fun fur or none at all. The members of MoMA bridled at this restriction, as synthetic fabrics had already taken their toll by rendering an iron with nails in it far less witty than was originally thought. Looking back in retrospect, the Senate strictures were a blessing in disguise, enabling the Dadaists to realize that they invented a form that lent itself to museums, which thereby lifted their spirits and gave them all a good laugh. Incident number 5. A frightening number of conceptual artists, 2, occupied space in downtown Manhattan, and when no one noticed, were obliged to go uptown. There they arranged some rocks in a pattern that announced that they were holding hostage 168 videotape cassettes. They demanded that people imagine that this was of any interest. When no response was forthcoming, they congratulated themselves heartily on their success and repeated the action endlessly.